And just going, I just want to kind of get to the root of everything. How did you get to become friends with Candy Darling and Andy Warhol? Although I know you and Andy Warhol weren't great friends.
Trying to remember now. Well, Candy Darling I met through Andy. And Andy, I think I met Andy. I saw Andy, the first time I saw Andy was at Max's, the back room at Max's. And I'd become a friend of Gerard Malanga, who was a wonderful guy, still around. A wonderful guy, handsome guy, was a poet. I used to have a beautiful naked picture of him, and it was just someone swiped. And it was through Gerard that I met Andy, because he was working for Andy would make these silk screens. I mean, Andy didn't do much of his own work. I mean, so he, threw up at if it's a factory, not doing anything, he asked you to do the roll on the silk screen, or and Gerard was very, very close to him, although he was cruel to him. Andy could be very cruel, and he was cruel to Gerard at the end. It was really.
In what way?
Gerard was in Paris. Had gone to Paris, was living in Paris for a while. And while he was Andy had given him, because Gerard made the pictures, and in payment, Andy had given him some of the lithographs. And Gerard was in Paris, and Andy had a place in Paris. I mean, Gerard was there, but so Andy was well known in Paris and knew his way around. In fact, when he died, Fred Hughes got on a plane and went to the apartment in Paris and pulled up the floorboards and pulled out a sack containing $1 million. Fred said about $1 million, and put it in a suitcase and came back to New York. Fred Hughes was his, and Fred was right to do it. Fred Hughes was, more than anybody else, Fred is the one that made Andy rich, because he's the one that connected Andy to rich people who wanted to have these horrible lithograph pictures of them, like Diane Furstenbergs done. And Andy got $25,000. He didn't do it himself, but if he'd go over and take the Polaroid, did get $25,000, then they would blow it up on a silk screen and produce this lithograph, and somebody would sign Andy's name, and $25,000 for 3 hours work.
Well, since you mentioned Dan von Furstenberg, I just wanted to get this on tape. How we met. We met in, I think it was the spring of 2014. We were at a Broadway show, a premiere of a play. I don't remember the name of it, but it was about.
It was you with Andy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember I came down the aisle.
Yeah, and you started talking to Andy, and then we all started talking. And I had just broken up with my boyfriend.
And who was that?
You never met him. I don't think his name was.
Well, let's get his name on the record here.
His name was Joseph.
Joseph. What?
Joseph. And I had had a very kind of intense and adventurous evening or weekend after that breakup, and I was telling you about it, which is, I think, what sparked your interest, and then, here
is
we
this
are.
Fire Island?
No. I'm not going to tell the story now. And then, as we were talking, and Andy, I think, had walked away, as we were talking, Dan von Furstenberg came down the aisle behind you, and you turned to her and you started talking to each other, and for not for very long, and she didn't seem to really want to talk to you, and she continued on her way. And after she left, I said, it didn't seem as if she liked you very much, to which you responded, well, that's because I slept with her husband.
Yes. Did I actually tell you that?
Yes.
God, I must have trusted you on first sight.
That was Egon?
Aegon. Von Furstenberg. God, he was a beautiful boy. Beautiful. He just died of AIDS. It was in it because he got AIDS. They'd split, and he went back to Milano. And a few months before he died, much to the shock of the family, he spoke at a gay rights rally, I think, in Milano, and talked of his experiences of being a gay man. And it was such an extraordinarily brave thing to do, because not Suni was fine with all that, but most of the family were, the Agnellis were not exactly gay friendly. I told you about him when I first met him, didn't I? I was a friend of Suni Rattazzi, who was Johnny Agnelli's sister. She was an Italian countess, and she had a wonderful apartment on Park Avenue here. And she married a guy named Rattazzi. But I knew her daughter, Delphina, really well, who was so beautiful. Such a sad life. And so anyway, I'm at SUNY Rattazzi's, and she gets this duplex, and there's this sort of swinging staircase. You walk in this big foyer. You see this big staircase that comes down. Then to the right is to your right is the living room, the dining room, and all the rest of it. And so I'm standing in the foyer, and I'm talking of all things to Lance Loud. I think it's Lance. And I see this man come. He's younger than 20-something, maybe early 20s, but he looked like he was 18. Curly blonde hair, and he's wearing very tight white chinos. I'll never forget it. And slipper sneakers, the sneakers that you don't tie. No socks. And a tight T-shirt with all this curly blonde hair. And he's coming down the steps, and he's in the foyer, and I'm standing there, and I'm like, got my mouth open, and he looks at me and points at me and starts laughing. And then comes on the way down, and he said, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm Dotson Raider. I'm a friend of Delphina's." "Oh, well, I guess you're a friend of mine then." And then we went into the living room. That's how I met him. Charming.
What year was this?
Hmm?
What year was this?
The early 70s, maybe 1972, maybe 71, somewhere in there. She had it'd be like 71, 72. And we became really close friends. And he had 2 kids with Diane. I told you a story about how they met. They met at, oh God, in Switzerland. What's the fancy school? Not Le Rosé. Is it Rosé?
I don't know.
Fancy private school.
I was not considered.
Oh, I think it's called Le Rosé or Rosé. And it's a very fancy upper class sort of prep school, boys and girls, where the rich go. And that's where Egon met Diane.
And they were both in school?
At school, yeah, they were in the same school. And Egon was, in fact, the only one I think he ever had, the only woman I think ever went to bed with was Diane. He went to bed with a lot of boys, and I knew some of these boys, but the only woman he ever went to bed with was Diane. So he'd probably trying to prove something. And Yanni Agnelli, his uncle, was very embarrassed because Egon had a reputation at the time. He was a small teenager of being a bit of a slut. And so they'd go, the family would go to their, on their yacht and then go to a port, and Egon would carry on with local sailors or whatever. And Yanni was getting fed up with it. And Egon was aware of that. His mother was upset about it, but he couldn't keep his pants zipped. So he's at Le Rosé, I think it's Le Rosé, I can look it up, at this private school in Switzerland, and meets Diane. They have sex and she becomes pregnant. And so Egon's just trying to get out of the family problem of their bitching at him about being such a slut. And so she gets pregnant, and she wants to marry Egon. And so Egon was completely indifferent to it. And he says, "Sure." Yanni Agnelli is absolutely beside himself with anger because she's Jewish. And the Agnelli family, first great wealth, came from government contracts they got through Mussolini, specifically to build tanks. They had this automobile company with it, and then they got the monopoly over automobile production from the Italian state. So they were very much beneficiaries of the fascists. So the idea that one of their little princelings would be marrying a Jew was quite beyond acceptance. And so Yanni Agnelli said, "No, you're not getting married." And Diane, this is a story I was told, showed up in Milano and went over to the Yanni Agnelli's mansion, had herself announced, and walked in and said, "I'm pregnant with your grandchild." And he said, "Oh," and she said, "Yes. Egon wants to marry me. Now you can have either a Christian Agnelli grandchild or you can have a Jewish Agnelli grandchild. It's up to you. If I marry Egon, he'll be raised Catholic. Otherwise, he'll be raised a Jew." And he said, "Get married." And they were raised Catholic, the 2 children.
How old was he when he passed from AIDS?
I don't know. You can look it up. He gave up.
Was he a young man still?
Yeah. He gave up, I told you earlier, I was just amazed, the speech he gave at the gay rights rally in Rome. I just thought it's very brave. What was the question?
No, that was good. I'll finish this just to go back to because this is just a continued fun story. so the night that we met, after the play, there was, I think it was the same night, after the play there was an after party with the cast and everything. And I don't know if you went, at a restaurant nearby. And I was with Andy Tobias. And
what was the play?
I'm pretty sure it was this play. I'm starting to actually have doubts. Maybe it was a different play, but I'm pretty sure it was a play, and tell me if this sounds familiar, about a gay couple. One of them dies of AIDS, and I guess they live in New York, and his mother comes from Texas, and she's conservative, and they have basically stopped speaking.
Is that Mark Crowley play?
I don't know I can't remember who did it. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Okay, so it was probably that play. And she comes to, pick up his stuff or whatever, and they have a very intense conversation.
Was Maureen Stapleton in that?
I don't remember any of these. I'll look it up. So anyway, so we go to this dinner. I go with Andy Tobias, and we run into, and I didn't know them at all. It's all for Andy. We ran into Gay Talese and his Talese and his wife. What was her name?
Oh God, Nan Talese.
Yeah, and she's she's a big time editor at Random House. Is that?
No, Gay was a writer.
No, but she wasn't she an editor?
Yeah, she was an editor
at Random House. Yeah. And so we all get food, and we all together, and we sit together, and we start talking. And I guess because I'm Russian, we started talking about that, and started talking about Vladimir Putin. And I think this was very shortly after. This must have been the same month even. This must have been like March. So he just invaded Crimea and eastern Ukraine for the first.
What year is this?
This was 2014. And
wait a minute, you're telling me this is when we met?
Mm-hmm. I think it's the same.
That's all the time. We've only known each other 9 years?
Yeah.
My God.
And
it was longer. I thought it was longer than that.
And Gay Talese kind of started praising Putin, and I kind of very calmly, but I just said, well, basically I disagree. Putin is very militaristic. He's very he had very anti-gay. As a gay person, that's problematic for me. There are lots of I explained multiple I think good reasons why one who comes from that place might be against him, and I think generally speaking, one doesn't question how somebody feels about the country or the leaders of a foreign country where they're from. I think you just allow, right?
Yes.
Generally speaking, I think
yes, generally speaking,
does,
yes.
Insist that they like whatever. So anyway, he kind of heard all of this, and fine, and we start eating, and then all of a sudden he just explodes, and he just starts yelling at me, and he's just like, leave this table right now, I can get the fuck out of here, and his wife Nan's trying to calm him down, and he just looks like completely bewildered, and we just get up and we go.
Why did he do that?
Well, because he's crazy and a fascist, I guess, is my explanation. You might know him better and have other explanations.
No, I don't think he's a fascist.
Well, he likes Putin very much.
He's very sure of his own opinions, and I can understand knowing him, why he would object to some whippersnapper foreigner from Russia trying to contradict him when he is Gay Talese.
Yeah.
Gay Talese is probably the most important writer, in fact, a cultural figure in the Western world, and you haven't the right to question his opinion. So if you were his age, he might not have treated you that way. But the fact you were a foreigner.
Yes, that's an opinion about his own country that apparently is too much.
I never had any trouble with Gay. I just.
I only met him that one time, so.
Pity you did. There used to be a place here called the Lanes, and I wish the hell it were still there.
I know, but I've heard a lot about it.